There's a brand new Omega Planet Ocean, and I got to spend 30 minutes with it in the boutique last night. I handled it, I wore it, I photographed it, but I noticed something about it that nobody else seems to be talking about. Welcome back to Horological. This watch is absolutely stunning, bold, modern, sculpted, brutalist and robust, almost perfect. But we'll talk about the only issue I found with it later on in the video. Despite the new case, the integrated strap system, those brutalist end links and some of the best case finishing Omega has produced in years, there's just one thing holding it back from being Omega's new Rolex Submariner competitor. It could also reflect in the soon to be released Seamaster 300M Professional 2026. So let's talk about this new Q4 2025 Planet Ocean watch. All the good points first, and there are many good points to reflect on. The instant I picked this watch up, I could tell Omega didn't just lightly refresh the Planet Ocean, they rebuilt it. This isn't a facelift, it's a new case architecture. This could be the start of a new design language direction for Omega. This is an important watch. It's an important release that seeds the path for the new Seamaster 300M Professional. Sharper lines, more confident transitions, stronger, brutalist, modern and deliberate. Rather than inherited from previous generations, the finishing is spectacular. In hand, light glides across the finishing, polished accents are controlled. The whole watch has a machined, almost architectural personality. The chamfer transitions are next level finishing, and paired with the orange rubber strap, the wrist presence is serious but playful at the same time. Here's a quick look at the key specifications. The case diameter is 42mm, the thickness is 13.8mm, the lug width is 21mm, and the lug to lug is 47.5mm. The movement is Omega's 8912 self-winding movement. The power reserve in this model is 60 hours, and it has a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on both sides. The water resistance is 600 metres, and the weight on the orange rubber strap or the black rubber strap is 124 grams. One of Omega's most interesting decisions here is the integrated strap and bracelet system. It borrows from the language of integrated sports watches. Think Royal Oak, Nautilus, and apply that angular flow to a diver. The overall result is impressive. The strap flows directly into the case. The end links look like industrial architecture. The watch feels more premium and more cohesive. And the best part, it finally gives the Planet Ocean a much stronger identity, one that doesn't live in the Submariner's shadow. This case might be the most confidently finished Planet Ocean Omega has ever produced. This is bold, sharp, modern Omega, not derivative, not imitative. And if this is the direction for the entire line, including the forthcoming Seamaster 300M Professional, then I'm absolutely all for it. The configuration I handled, the orange rubber strap, it was available to me on the night with no wait list at £7,400. That puts this generation of Planet Ocean close to the Rolex Submariner pricing territory, and this is Omega signalling we're playing at the top table here, and honestly, based on the finishing, they almost deserve it. Almost. The bezel action still isn't there. It's improved, but it's not on the same level as a Submariner or even a Tudor Blancpain. The new Planet Ocean still has a small amount of backplay. It's not huge, but it's there. Rolex uses a ceramic bearing supported bezel system with a vertical click spring and ratchet wheel architecture. It is widely acknowledged as the best 120 click bezel in the industry. no debate. Tudor uses a ceramic bearing system on the newer Blancpain models, and that is widely regarded as the best 60-click bezel in the industry. No debate about that either. Omega uses a soft detent spring system. It doesn't measure up to the competition. It's harsher in operation, and I now have experienced several watches with noticeable backplay, including my own Seamaster. For a 7k plus watch with a brand new outstanding case design, it's just not good enough. A watch designed to compete against the best in the industry. This really matters. Rolex's bezel is crisp, perfectly indexed, zero play. Tudor's ceramic bearing system is incredibly tactile, zero play there as well. Omega's, it's slightly harsher, slightly less refined, less smooth in action, and a noticeable amount of backplay. It doesn't ruin the watch, far from it, but it does prevent it from being a complete package. A bezel is more than a tool. It's a tactile interface signalling precision and manufacturing prowess, and when you're asking Submariner money, the bezel has to feel as premium as the rest of the watch, and that's the thing. Omega absolutely nailed everything else. They nailed it. New case, new geometry, integrated strap system, bold wrist presence, incredible finishing, a real design identity. That's why this bezel stands out so much. It's the single remaining weakness on an otherwise outstanding dive watch. After getting hands-on with it, here's the truth. This new Planet Ocean is one of Omega's most modern and confident designs in years. It's bold, beautiful, over-engineered, but in the best way possible. But it's also frustrating because it's only 10% away from being the true Submariner rival that Omega fans have waited years for. If Omega tightens the bezel tolerances, this becomes a world-class dive watch capable of challenging anything at any price right now on the market. It's a stunning watch that's 90% of the way there. There's a strong rumour that Omega will launch the new Seamaster 300M Professional at the end of Q1 2026. That timing, that lines up perfectly with Omega's historical behaviour. They love to release models just ahead of industry events like Watches and Wonders. Let's just hope that the bezel on the new Seamaster 300M Professional is just a touch better engineered than this one. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. There's much more to good design than just the Fibonacci sequence, although that's a great starting foundation. Let's explore some other aspects of what makes watches so special. Welcome back to Horological. If you strike a tuning fork, it rings for a while. That lingering vibration is called Q factor or quality factor. It measures how long something keeps resonating after it's been excited. Every watch oscillator has a Q factor, but so does taste. Some designs don't just look right, they vibrate right. They hum at a frequency that feels tuned to us. Today we're going to find out why certain watches, sneakers, sounds and even flavours all seem to share a hidden inner rhythm that makes them special, because horological might just be the hidden Q factor of watch YouTube. In physics, Q factor measures energy efficiency, how sharply something resonates. In watches, it governs the balance wheel's oscillation, the purity of a quartz crystal's frequency, even the ringing tone of a sonnerie au passage complication. Christopher Ward Bel Canto, but outside of acoustics engineering, the same rule applies to aesthetic resonance when form, function and feeling align so precisely that you can't quite explain why it works, only that it does. I call that latent resonance, the invisible tuning between design, culture and emotion. And when that tuning is perfect, you have found strong hidden Q factor. Take watches and sneakers, two completely different worlds united by performance you can wear. Both translate engineering into identity. Rubber, carbon, titanium, knit, different materials, same mission, grip, flex, resilience. When you snap a diver's clasp or lace a shoe, you're performing the same ritual, securing precision to your body. Limited edition drops, that's just the Q factor of culture, timing, scarcity, anticipation. When a watch launches at midnight on Hodinkee and sells out in 3 minutes, it's not just marketing, it's resonance. It literally pulses through the community. The Submariner and the Air Jordan 1 sneakers, they share a sense of functional heritage turned symbolic power. Although the Blancpain 50 Fathoms and the New Balance 650, they both came first, the same synergy, but a different, more niche resonance, a different style of Q factor, no less important, but noticeably different. They all began as tools, some became absolute totems, others not so much. That's the difference between a high Q design and another object that fills the same role but doesn't resonate quite so strongly. They still have their place, just not at the pinnacle of desire. They appeal to a more contrarian personality, and ironically that can be a good thing too, depending on your own personal Q factor sensitivity. Humans read objects like sentences. We look for rhythm, contrast and balance. Design theorists call this gestalt perception. We seek harmony between separate elements. A well-designed diver, think Seiko SKX. It feels intuitive because every element aligns with the body. Crown at 4 o'clock, it avoids the wrist bone. Indices are bold enough for a split second glance. The bezel has the same tactile logic as the tread in a car tyre or the grip tape in a skateboard. Sneaker panels, camera grips, even bicycle handlebars, they follow identical heuristics function that feels inevitable. That's the hidden grammar of ergonomics. Design that disappears because it's already in tune with our senses. In food, umami is that savoury harmony that you can't quite define. Design has the same phenomenon, unexpected combinations that satisfy. A bronze case that patinas against turquoise loom, for example, a dress watch on a NATO strap, matte dial with gilt accents. They shouldn't work, and yet they create tension and a strange, desirable harmony, an unctuous kind of savoury treat that is often enhanced by powerful accompaniments like wasabi or perhaps a sweet acidic chutney. The Belova Marine Star in brushed steel with its brutalist angles next to that refined dark blue bezel, that's visual umami, industrial but elegant in the same glance. So is an Omega Seamaster on a NATO strap or a Panerai Luminor on rubber. Luxurious form meeting tool forward purposeful intent. Our eyes crave that push-pull. That's umami in design, the Q factor of surprise. To decode your own personal resonance for objects, test for LINK, link. Legacy, does it carry a story worth knowing and telling? A Blancpain 50 Fathoms hums with decades of dive history. Intent, was it built for clear purpose? The SKX wasn't a decorative piece, it was a 6425 ISO rated reliable dive watch that real divers knew could take the odd knock and return for more dive after dive. Needs, does it meet human ergonomics beautifully? The Grand Seiko SBGA 211 Snowflake, it uses titanium not for hype but for lightness and on-wrist comfort. That's sympathy and materials choice. And kudos, does it form respect across multiple contextual planes? When a G-Shock is on the wrist of a rescue diver or a rapper, that's cultural bandwidth. That's wide cultural bandwidth across a huge spectrum. The stronger the link, the stronger the Q factor. Let me give you a perfect example of how the hidden Q factor works and why size, specs and even correct proportions don't always matter. Take the Belova Lunar Pilot. People always say it wears huge, and they're right, it does. It's big, it's an unapologetic slab of a watch with real wrist presence, and in strict ergonomic terms, yes, its oversized footprint does have a little bit of, it does detract from a little bit of its pure Q factor, but here's the truth. A collection made entirely of 40mm cases with 20mm lug widths isn't really a collection. It's the same watch repeated over and over and over again. The Lunar Pilot earns its place for a completely different reason, because despite its size, despite its stance, despite everything the specification sheet tells you, Commander Dave Scott wore the original Belova chronograph on the lunar surface, Apollo 15 EVA-3, the only privately owned watch ever worn on the moon, and the only confirmed non-Omega to reach the lunar surface and return fully intact and fully functional. That single fact injects the Lunar Pilot with a Q factor that completely overrides any negativity you could attach to its size. This is a watch you wear intentionally, not because it's ergonomically perfect, but because it carries identity, meaning and historical gravity. Here's where the Q factor gets even more interesting though. The Belova Lunar Pilot sits in the same philosophical place as the Seiko Speed Timer Pogue reissue. Both modern watches are reissues or evolutions of historically significant space-worn originals. Personal watches taken into space without formal NASA approval. Tools that were chosen because the astronauts themselves trusted them implicitly. Modern quartz mechanical descendants of mechanical originals, and crucially, their stories only became widely known long after the missions. Colonel William Pogue wearing his personal Seiko 6139 on Skylab 4, Dave Scott switching to his Belova after the crystal popped off his NASA-issued Omega Speedmaster. These weren't corporate decisions, these were personal decisions made by men operating on the edge of human capability. That's what real Q factor looks like. A watch so trusted, so reliable, so perfectly suited to its task that an astronaut took it into space against official guidelines. And here's the magic inside a watch collection. The Belova Lunar Pilot has Q factor. The Seiko Pogue Speed Timer reissue has Q factor. But together they create a symbiotic resonance. Two renegade space watches, two mission-proven tools, two pieces of hardware taken aboard because their owners genuinely relied on them. A collection containing both doesn't gain Q factor in a linear fashion, it gains Q factor exponentially. Dave Scott's Speedmaster, it didn't fail because Omega had made a bad watch. The crystal popped off after an extended EVA, with the watch exposed to temperature extremes at the edge and likely beyond what NASA had originally qualified that watch for. This kind of real world stress, crystals popping, watches pushed past their tested envelope, reinforces exactly why Omega had already begun developing the Project Alaska Speedmaster, an experimental design with a red anodized thermal shroud engineered to survive brutal temperature swings in lunar service, a genuine engineering response to real off-world conditions. So the Belova Lunar Pilot didn't just survive the moon, it survived an environment where even NASA's most trusted wrist-worn timing instrument reached its operational limits, and that makes its Q factor almost unmatched. Resonance isn't just physical, it's emotional persistence. Why do we keep thinking about a watch we once saw in a shop window? Because its vibration matched our own. I've spoken at length now about my family connections to the Scottish Westclocks factory, creating mechanical alarm clocks that would tick in bedside tables all around the world. Decades later, when I hold a vintage Westclocks alarm clock, it resonates on a much deeper frequency. Heritage, family, time itself, That's real hidden Q factor. When mechanics synchronise with memory, a watch can become a tuning fork for personal association and history. The world is full of noise, specifications, prices, hype, but beneath it all are quiet resonances waiting to be discovered and enjoyed. Every collector, every designer, every creator has a personal Q factor, the ability to make things fit their own personal needs, wants and desires. So maybe that's what Horological is all about. We're not chasing the loudest signals here, but learning to keep the personal one alive. Horology meets harmony, if you like. So stay tuned, get subscribed, click that like button, be the Q Factor curator in your own story. If this idea resonates with you, share your own Q Factor recommendations in the comments. Let's do one watch, a piece of clothing and perhaps another random item that just work together for you. And if you've just discovered this channel, get subscribed, because this isn't just another watch channel, it is absolutely the hidden Q Factor of watch YouTube. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. When a watch survives the jungle, survives Hollywood, survives expeditions across frozen continents, and survives moments in real life, you then begin to understand why some watches become icons. This is the Seiko Arnie. Welcome back to Horological. Most people know the Arnie as the watch that was strapped to Arnold Schwarzenegger's wrist in Commando and Predator, a rugged anodigi weapons grade watch perfectly matched to the action movie era of the early and mid 1980s. But for me, the Arnie is far more than a Hollywood prop. This is the story of my Arnie, a green turquoise bezel version named the Tropical Lagoon SNJ039P1, a watch my daughters bought me, a watch I modified, and a watch that ended up tied to a moment in my life that changed everything. In the 1980s, watches weren't chosen by brand alignment or sponsorship departments. There were no glossy brand deals, no marketing driven product placement. Props teams and stunt coordinators chose watches for one reason: they had to work. They had to survive extreme heat, extreme cold, impacts, explosions, water, mud, real stunt work, not CGI. It was the 1980s after all, and the Seiko H558, the original Arnie, it earned its place the hard way. In Commando, it's there during the mall fight, the phone booth takedown and the grenade-fueled final assault let off some steam, Bennett. In Predator, it's strapped to Arnold's wrist as he crawls through mud, sets jungle traps and faces one of cinema's greatest creatures, get to the chopper. This wasn't a fashion choice, it was a tool chosen because it survived where everything else had failed. The original Arnie, it wasn't created for collectors or boutique shoppers, it was engineered as a professional adventure diver watch hybrid, a watch for people who needed reliability where failure actually mattered. Before Hollywood, long before Hollywood took notice, the Seiko H558 had already proven itself. Arctic and Antarctic expeditions, Himalayan climbs, military personnel, privately purchased, not issued, survivalists and search and rescue teams. In Predator, Dutch is adamant at the start with Dylan that they're a search and rescue team, not assassins. Technical divers, mountaineer Richard Dickie Brass, the first person to climb the 7 summits, he wore a Seiko H558. It functioned at minus 40 degrees on polar expeditions. It survived altitude swings that made mechanical watches struggle. It handled salt water, shock, pressure and was legible in the dark. In the 1980s, Seiko were not following trends, they were leading the pack, they were creating the trend. And then there's mine, a bezel that shifts personality from turquoise to deep blue depending on the light, a saturated, almost luminous shade of blue that feels alive. These Tropical Lagoon variants, they came out as a special edition version produced in smaller numbers and tied to the wider Prospex Tropical Lagoon special edition releases. They have already become cult pieces amongst Arnie enthusiasts, but I didn't leave it stock. I swapped the original shroud for a darker gunmetal blue upgrade, stealthier, richer. Then I added a custom silicone strap keeper from Uncle Straps. The original metal keeper it's got sharp edges and it wasn't really fit for daily wear comfort. Simple changes, but they transformed it. The watch went from interesting to mine, a one-of-one expression piece, what I think a Seiko Arnie should be. I had addressed the watch's two weakest points. The plastic OEM shroud felt cheap, and on the original H558 it was a common point of failure, quite often going brittle and cracking. The naked Arnie movement arose from this phenomenon. The replacement 316L stainless steel gunmetal custom shroud I fitted, it removes any chance of cracking and it brings this more authentic looking Arnie up to spec with its bigger brother, the SNJ 035P1, which had a metal shroud straight out the gate, but not the form factor of the original H558. The irony of removing a plastic shroud, replacing it with a metal one, whilst also removing the metal keeper and replacing that with a plastic one, well, silicone, it's not lost in me, but it's all about choosing the correct material for the job in hand. This watch carries more than colour and specifications. My daughters chose this watch for me on Father's Day. They knew I loved Seiko, they knew I'd talked about the Commando watch, and unbelievably they picked exactly the version that I would have chosen for myself. As much as I enjoy an aluminium Pepsi bezel, I have quite a few in the collection and also quite a few monochrome watches, so this exact version of the Arnie reissue, it sits well in my collection. It was the first watch they ever selected for me, and because of that it carries immense personal meaning even before gathering memories. And then everything changed. A drunk driver hit my car with an effective impact velocity of 70 miles per hour, one of those impacts that rewires how you think about life. I needed months of physio and I still carry injuries from that day, and the Arnie still on my wrist. The strap held, the shroud held, the case held. It didn't lose a second, and it had damaged the steering wheel of our 4x4 vehicle while effectively protecting my wrist. After that, this watch wasn't just sentimental, it wasn't just a cool 80s movie prop reissue, it wasn't just an icon, it became a talisman for me. The Arnie story, it isn't just built on emotions and movies, it has the technical pedigree to back it all up. A full ISO certified 6425 diver, shock resistance, magnetic resistance, water resistance, darkness legibility, temperature stability, strap and spring bar integrity tests passed with ease, pressure and condensation tests. On the case back, the legendary Seiko Tsunami Wave, a symbol reserved only for Seiko's true dive watches, and the original H558, it was the world's first ISO certified Ana Digi diver, a hybrid creation decades ahead of its time. Seiko weren't only keeping up, they were leading the pack, and here's a detail that gets overlooked. This watch is smart. The H851 solar movement in the modern version of this watch, it uses a light activated power save mode. In darkness, the digital module sleeps to preserve energy, expose it to light, and it wakes up instantly, no lag, no hesitation. Collectors celebrate FP Journe for the Elegantes motion-based gyroscopic sleep mode, a masterpiece of independent watchmaking. But here's a philosophical twist. Journe uses motion, Seiko uses light. Different worlds, different technologies, but the same underlying idea. A watch that rests when you do. Did Francis Paul Journe ever see an Arnie? I don't know, and there's no evidence to support that assertion, but collectors love whispering about the possibility that the spirit of power-save engineering might have drifted through the industry long before the Elegante existed. Another feature Arnie fans adore is the hand setting system. The hands can move forward and backward independently of each other. They take the shortest route possible to where you've set the time. The time on the digital screen is basically tied to the analogue time. You set it digitally, click the crown in, and it goes to that time in the shortest route possible. It's fantastic. Modern watch collectors praise this feature in high-end watches like that FP Journe Elegante, but Seiko offered a version of this decades earlier in a tool watch built for jungles, oceans and expeditions. To have fitted bi-directional micro servos was absolute genius. The Arnie hides an impressive amount of functionality. Perpetual calendar until the year 2100. Set it once, forget about it. Dual time, digital second time zone, and effective GMT, quartz accuracy rated officially at plus or minus 15 seconds per month, but in reality it's much more accurate than that. The Japanese are always humble with regard to technical claims. It's all about managing expectations, and this watch for me far exceeds them. Solar charging, no battery changes for years, extreme reliability, temperature tested, shock tested, pressure tested. If you wanted it to, this watch could replace almost anything in your collection. Dive watch, it's ISO certified. GMT, it has dual time accuracy, it's quartz. Longevity, it's got the perpetual calendar. Everything except a dress watch, and honestly, even then, I've been tempted. Has anybody got a Milanese strap for this watch? Hit me up in the comments if you do. Hi there, have you got a 22mm lug width Milanese bracelet, please? Yeah, I'm considering wearing my Arnie as a dress watch. The modern Seiko Arnie isn't a one-to-one reissue, it's something more interesting. It retains the soul and the tool purpose of the original H558, but it modernises everything. Better materials, better reliability, solar charging, the old one used to chew through batteries, better durability, more refined ergonomics. It's not a replica of the original, it's an evolution, a positive evolution. Arguably the best kind of reissue watches gather stories. A crystal can be replaced, a bezel can be replaced, a movement can be replaced, can be fixed, a battery can be replaced, but the memories a watch collects, those never leave. This Arnie reminds me of my daughters. It reminds me of how lucky I was that day. The case diameter is 47.8mm, the thickness is 13.8mm, it has a 22mm lug width and a lug to lug of 50.5mm. It's got a Seiko Solar Caliber H851 movement, and power reserve is 6 months of normal use, or that extends to 20 months when it reaches that power reserve sleep mode that I spoke about earlier. The crystal is Seiko's proprietary Hardlex mineral. Water resistance is that ISO certified 200 metres, and the weight is 114 grams on the OEM rubber strap. The lume in this watch is nothing short of outstanding. It uses Seiko's proprietary Lumibrite formula, and in this watch it is absolutely epic. There is one small negative about this watch, given it is an over 47mm case size. The dial real estate is quite compressed. Here it is compared to some other watches, and you can really see that here. The thickness of the bezel, the thickness of the shroud, and the way that they've had to squeeze that digital readout on top of the dial. It really does compress the analogue portion a little bit. This is the watch worn in the jungle in Predator, the watch strapped to Arnold's wrist in Commando. for me, it's the turquoise dial my daughters chose, it's the watch that stayed intact in a 70 mph collision, it's the ISO rated professional diver with the tsunami wave on the case back, a reissue of the first anodigi diver in history, with a perpetual calendar, dual time, solar intelligence, light activated power saving, bi-directional hand setting, and a story forged in real life use. This Arnie, my Arnie, this is my lucky watch, a watch with immense levels of Q factor. If you've got a watch with a great story, drop it in the comments below, like, share and subscribe, and as always, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. I was a little cheeky last week, but I'm Glaswegian. It goes with the territory. Welcome back to Horological. I posted a link to my Seiko Arnie video on the Club Erebus Facebook page. It could have got deleted, but here's the interesting part. Jodie from Just One More Watch, the co-owner of Erebus Watches, along with Stephen Parker, actually liked the post. They both did, and Jodie owns the same Tropical Lagoon Arnie that I have, so I knew there was a shared synergy there. Then something unexpected happened. A mutual subscriber reached out and said, "Mate, we appear to live quite close to each other. Do you want to borrow my Erebus Titan, my brand new Erebus Titan that just arrived that day, to review on your YouTube channel?" What do you say to that? Of course I would love to review your brand new Erebus Titan for my YouTube channel. So I jumped in the car, I drove through Storm Bram, Scotland winter, of course we were having a storm, and we headed to the Higgety Piggety Tea Room in Lanarkshire. A brilliant agri-tourism cafe, by the way. Fantastic food, fantastic service, big props to the staff and the chef. And sitting on the table was the Erebus Titan. The first thing that hit me was the packaging. Years and years of Jodie opening AliExpress Pelican cases has clearly done something to him psychologically, because this packaging, it's next level. A leatherette zip case with elasticated safe line storage for 2 watches, a filled out warranty card. Who even knew this was a thing? A filled out warranty card? A bracelet sizing tool appropriate for the actual bracelet supplied. Again, imagine that. And a branded polishing cloth. Before I even seen the watch, I thought, right, somebody has thought about this. Then the bracelet. Oh, Erebus call it the super engineered bracelet. They're not joking. The articulation is extremely consistent across all the links. It exudes quality immediately. The clasp has a very positive click, snap, shut. And here comes the first small negative though. It's a double push deployment, but not a double security fold over clasp. That's slightly odd on a 500 metre dive watch with a helium escape valve, but we'll come back to that. This watch has an automatic case integrated helium escape valve. For anyone new to the concept, helium molecules are tiny. On deep saturation dives, they can migrate into the case, especially at that deep pressure. They get compressed even smaller, and then when you ascend and decompress, those molecules expand rapidly. If they can't escape, they'll try to exit the watch by any way possible. They can pop the crystal, they can even damage the movement from the inside, putting pressure on the rotor and bending it into the actual working parts of the movement. The automatic helium escape valve, it prevents all of that by venting internal pressure the moment it exceeds a calibrated threshold. Is anyone taking the Erebus Titan saturation diving in the North Sea? Probably not, but it's really cool to have in any watch. You've got to agree with that, and it's properly done. This is implemented well in this watch. In Glasgow, the name Titan, that refers to a giant preserved cantilever crane on the River Clyde, a symbol of industry, engineering and built from Girder's philosophy. This watch absolutely leans into that heritage because the Titan weighs, you're not going to believe this, 225 grams as supplied. But And this is really important here. The bracelet and clasp counterbalance the head of the watch perfectly, so the weight feels quality, not unmanageable. I guarantee prototype iterations were brutal on this watch, but the final finished product, it's well balanced and completely intentional. You can tell immediately that this is not Erebus's first release. This is a product of multiple design cycles and hard-learned lessons. Here in the UK, fully landed, this watch comes in at just over £500. That's a joke, but in the best possible way. I've handled lots and lots of dive watches over the years. Within seconds, this stood out as something very different, not a homage, not derivative, but a watch with a clear design intention and engineering philosophy well implemented. There are negatives. The clasp really should have a secondary safety lock for a 500 metre tool watch diver. You know, everything else is subjective though. If you like light watches, this is definitely not going to be for you. If you want a generic vanilla diver watch, there's plenty out there. This is not that. But, and here's the but in a positive way again, if you love big professional divers, think Rolex Deep Sea, a James Cameron, or a larger Blancpain 45mm 50 fathoms automatic, this is your territory. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case diameter in this watch is 44mm, the thickness is 15.5mm, lug width is 22mm, lug to lug 48.5mm, the movement is a Seiko NH35, power reserve will be round about 41 hours, the lume is BGW9 Super Luminova, the crystal is a double domed sapphire with clear AR coating on the inside, the water resistance is 500 metres and the weight as supplied on this bracelet is 225 grams. The bezel is 120 clicks, very positive clicks. A tiny little bit of backplay at the mid-click point, but much less than my Seamaster 300M Professional and less than that 2025 Planet Ocean watch that I recently handled. The alignment on the watch is excellent. There's no lazy or sloppy quality control going on here. The crystal's a subtle dome. It's beautifully judged. It adds a bit of vintage charm while managing to hide the thickness required for that 500 metre dive rating. The dial, this one has the Sunburst Radiant Purple Fume. Absolutely stunning and a brilliant choice for standing out in a watch box. The lume is outstanding, multi-layered application with proper curing time between coats. This adds cost and manufacturing complexity. Most brands skip this. Erebus didn't. The lume crown, a killer touch, attention to fine detail. The gasket material, Vuitton, a high-performance fluoroelastomer that I've encountered many times in the food industry. The same material used in automotive, aerospace, chemical processing and high-end food processing machinery, like a Pacojet for example. It grips noticeably as you tighten the crown. That is rare to see in a micro brand at this price. Feeling the watch in hand, I suspect that 500 metres rating is conservative. If this ever shows up on Beyond the Press, they might need to call Henka, the explosives guy, to actually damage this watch. The Erebus Titan, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but that is not a weakness of this product. Being polarising is often the mark of a strong design philosophy. The Titan rejects the bland, vanilla, cookie cutter 40mm diver trend, and instead it commits to a unique identity rooted in materials engineering, intention and Glasgow adjacent industrial design DNA, and I absolutely respect that. Huge thanks to Andy, a subscriber of my channel, for trusting me with a watch that had literally just landed the day before. That says a lot about the watch community, this channel and the Titan itself. If you're new to my channel, consider a like and subscribe for more horological content just like this. Comments are always welcome, and I'll try and answer as many as I can in the first couple of days of publishing this video. And here's a question: would you wear an Erebus Titan? This watch isn't amazing for the price. It's amazing, full stop, and I'll bet you Jodie likes iron brew that's apparently made from girders too. But remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. So, I ordered something from Glasgow brand Paulin, but it wasn't a watch. Welcome back to Horological. I ordered a Paulin Geo wall clock, and I want to use that as a jumping off point, not just to talk about the clock itself, but about what Paulin actually is as a brand, because Paulin aren't just a watch company. They're something more design-led, more playful, a company that makes their typographic approach accessible and available. And yes, they are also the sister brand of anOrdain, the Glasgow enamel dial watchmakers with famously long wait lists. So let's talk clocks, watches, typography, screen printing, and how all of this fits together. This is the Paulin Geo wall clock. At first glance, it is deceptively simple, but like most good design, the thinking runs deep. The case is made from cork and aluminium, two materials that immediately tell you this is about sustainability and longevity, not plastic and disposability. It uses a sweeping seconds hand, which gives it a calm, continuous motion rather than that familiar quartz tick, something that matters more than people realise in a living or a working space. But the real star of the show is the dial. The clock uses Paulin's bespoke Geo typeface, inspired by the Art Deco forms of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, Glasgow's most influential design voice. It's geometric, legible, and unmistakably Scottish in character and implementation without being pastiche. Now here's where it gets really clever. You don't just buy a Geo clock, you design your Geo clock. Paulin offers 27 different hand combinations, meaning you can tune the clock to the room it's going into. Minimalist, playful, bold, or restrained, you choose. It's a rare thing in clockmaking, genuine customisation without turning it into a gimmick. The latest iteration of the Geo brings production closer to home. The dials are now screen printed in Glasgow by Matthew Rich of the MARS studio. Previously the dials were printed digitally outside the city. Now where it says Glasgow on that dial, it really means it. Screen printing is a different beast altogether. This is a hands-on analogue process. Ink is pushed through a fine silk mesh. Multiple layers are built up to create opacity and subtle relief. You end up with a surface that has depth, not just colour. Paulin first worked with Matthew on the Ono wall clock, a collaboration with Ono Type Company, and that experience convinced them to bring this refined printing technique into their core collection. And I love that decision because it reinforces something important. This isn't designed for a quick manufacturing turnaround, high margin product. It's quality-led design. Clocks are deceptively difficult objects to make well. Large dials exaggerate imperfection and exaggerate poor design choice particularly well. Alignment matters, legibility matters, and this shift to local artisanal production, it feels like a quiet but confident move, one that mirrors what anOrdain has been doing with enamel dials for years now. Even the back of this clock is finished well. Steve Jobs once said that his father made him paint both sides of a fence, even the side no one would see. And that idea carried through to Apple's product design. Paulin has applied that same thinking here. Paulin is the sister brand to anOrdain, the Glasgow watchmakers best known for their exquisite vitreous enamel dials and multi-year waiting lists. But Paulin isn't trying to compete with that. It's more accessible, more experimental, more playful. If anOrdain is about obsessive craft and permanence, Paulin is about graphic clarity, typography and joy in everyday objects. That's why the clocks make such good gifts, and slightly tongue-in-cheek, they're also a good way to scratch the itch while you're waiting for an anOrdain allocation to come through. Wink wink guys. And it's worth pointing out, there are anOrdain watches available right now without a wait list. Not the vitreous enamel dial models, but the Model 2 field watch, which uses a vitreous glazed porcelain dial rather than the more difficult higher attrition rate fired enamel dials. Same design language, same Glasgow DNA, much more attainable. So with that cleared up, let's move back to Paulin watches, starting with their newest release, the Mara. Mara comes from the Scots Gaelic word, means of the sea. It's appropriate here. And this is Paulin stepping firmly into proper tool watch territory in their familiar, fun way. What matters here isn't that it's a 300-metre dive watch. It's that Paulin didn't abandon their graphic language to get there. The dial is lacquer painted using Paulin's bespoke WIM typeface paired with a clean minute track and bold geometric markers. Legibility is excellent, graphic but purposeful. The watch is protected by a double-domed sapphire crystal with 3 layers of anti-reflective coating. Framing the dial is a domed sapphire bezel. Blancpain anybody? With Swiss Super Luminova printed on its underside. A smart implementation that improves durability while keeping the loom crisp. The case features a 120 click unidirectional bezel, a screw down crown, a fully closed case back at 39.7mm in diameter and 13.5mm thick. It has real presence but remains wearable for most wrists. Inside is the La Joux G101 calibre movement. A movement that we're seeing now more frequently as a credible alternative to a Sellita or an ETA. Each Mara comes with 2 straps, a custom high quality injection moulded rubber strap and a fabric strap made from recycled fishing nets, Blancpain again, lined with Italian Alcantara suede for design-led on-wrist comfort. That whole sustainability thread, it runs right through the brand. Mike over at This Watch, That Watch, he just done a recent deep dive, pun fully intended, on the Mara. If you want to check it out after this video, I'll link it in the description. So next up, the Paulin model. Arguably the watch that best represents Paulin's design philosophy. The model uses a tonal shaped case with a dual finish construction. The black steel inner body houses the movement. The brushed steel outer case wraps around it and is secured with visible screws. The name module comes from that this modular construction, designed to accommodate different movement calibers. The range includes quartz options using the ETA F06105. It's got a manual wind mechanical version using the ETA 7001, and it has an automatic variant, usually powered by the Lejeune Parade G101 previously mentioned. The Model A manual, it's priced at £990 Great British pounds. That is especially compelling at just 8.2mm thick with a premium sapphire box crystal. It's slim, comfortable and architectural in a way that very few watches manage to achieve. It feels designed, not styled. Then there's the Ono model. Oh wow, this was a collaboration with the San Jose type foundry Ono, launched in California at the Wind Up Watch Fair. The dial is unapologetically expressive. The numerals are freeform, interlocking and playful, with exaggerated emphasis on the cardinal points 12, 3, 6 and 9. Legibility here is tested, torsionally stressed, but never broken. The colour palette references California design icons like Sister Carita Kent and Saul Bass, creating a fascinating transatlantic design dialogue between Glasgow and the West Coast. Available in both mechanical and quartz configurations, the Ono module shows what happens when typography leads the design, not hype marketing trends. So yes, this video started with a wall clock, but the Paulin Geo, it's really a statement about how design thinking scales from walls to wrists to everyday life. Graphic, local, thoughtful and quietly distinctive. In a world of increasingly homogeneous watch design, that matters. For more content like this, like, share, subscribe, and remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. Here's a story about a watch that was dismissed far too quickly. A watch that most people judged before they ever held it, wore it, or understood what it was trying to do. And the more time I've spent with it, the more convinced I am that the early reactionary reviews did accessible horology a real disservice. You know the watch, you've seen the thumbnail. Welcome back to Horological. Today, I want to show you why the Blancpain Swatch Ocean of Storms might quietly be one of the most interesting watches released in recent years, and why, in the fullness of time, it may be remembered as something genuinely special. This story actually starts years ago, long before Swatch ever announced a collaboration with Blancpain. It starts with composite materials, experimentation, and the ongoing debate inside watchmaking about what counts as real horology and what gets dismissed as novelty. I own a Panerai PAM 1661 Carbotech, a watch that was celebrated, genuinely celebrated for its lightness. Every reviewer talked about the way it disappeared on wrist, the high-tech carbon composite case, the warmth of the materials used, the comfort, the softness of the geometry. Lightness was marketed as a luxury feature. People associated it with innovation, performance and modernity. On the left we have a historic dive watch reference reimagined in a modern composite material, and on the right we have a historic dive watch reference reimagined in a modern composite material. And yet, when the Blancpain Swatch collaboration arrived, super light on wrist, just as comfortable as the Panerai in all-day wear, many of those same voices looked at the weight and said, it feels cheap. Two watches, one framed as a high-end luxury Swiss timepiece, and the other framed as a cheap plastic toy watch. But the biggest differentiator isn't design implementation or materials choice, it's price. That says a lot more about us than it does about the watch, because comfort doesn't know the price tag. Materials don't suddenly become inferior because they're affordable. And when you actually live with this watch day after day on the wrist, it becomes very clear that the lightness is a strength of the watch, just as it is on the Panerai. And that's where this journey begins. Before we get into engineering, movement philosophy, loom, bezel design, bezel action, anti-magnetic properties, the crystal, or the history of disposable movements, I want to start with the first thing that actually surprised me. Something small, something subtle, something almost no one has mentioned. The dial. The Ocean of Storms has a black sunburst dial, a genuinely beautiful fine sunburst that only reveals itself in the correct light. It's quiet, purposeful, it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but when the light catches it, the entire watch, it comes alive with a depth and richness that you simply do not expect from a collaboration at this price point. To me, this looks very close to the dial on versions of the full fat high calorie 50 fathoms. I've been in the boutique and checked in person. Remarkable to get this dial at this price point. This is going to be a recurring theme here, the unexpected. The loom, for example, is excellent. Not good for a Swatch, not fine for the price tag. Excellent loom, full stop. Bright, consistently applied with real staying power. It feels like a proper diving instrument. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case diameter is 42.3mm, the thickness 14.4mm, lug width 22mm, lug to lug 44.5mm. The movement is a System 51 3Hz non-hacking. Power reserve is 90 hours. The crystal is double domed bioacrylic anti-scratch coated. The water resistance is a stated 91 metres, and the weight on wrist with the OEM strap is 45 grams. And the bezel, this is where things get genuinely interesting, because I had two earlier Blancpain Swatch models when the line first came out, an Antarctic and an Atlantic. The bezel action in those early batches, it ranged from just okay to slightly inconsistent. The bezel on this Ocean of Storms, it even sounds remarkably similar, in particular to the 38mm 50 fathoms watch. Compare the sound.
It's very tight, 120 click, but the space between each click makes it feel like a 60 click bezel.
Now this from the Blancpain Swatch. My Ocean of Storms bezel is noticeably improved over the earlier colourful watches. The clicks are crisp and clean, confident even, and the backplay is practically non-existent, better than many mainstream divers that cost many times the price. This tells us something important. Swatch is iterating, Swatch is developing, quietly, consistently, behind the scenes. They are refining tolerances, tightening moulding precision, improving click springs. They're not treating this like a gimmick, they're treating it like a platform for the future. The Blancpain Swatch uses a bio-based acrylic crystal with a hard anti-scratch coating. It's the same material family as Omega's Hesalite. So you get that warmer optical profile and the slight edge distortion vintage acrylic is well known for. The hard coat improves surface hardness, it doesn't turn it into sapphire. You can still pick up marks and you can still polish them out in a few minutes with Polywatch. Technically it behaves just like a modernised version of Hesalite, with an added protective layer, which brings me to a far bigger point, the movement. People love to mock the System 51. They call it disposable, plastic, unserviceable. They repeat the same lines without ever asking if they're true or even if they matter. But let me tell you a story from my own family history. The Westclocks factory in Scotland, one of the great mass manufacturers of clocks and watches in the 20th century, and due to my family connections that I have covered in several previous videos, I have documentation from the 1950s, 60s and 70s stating clearly that Westclock's official policy was to replace movements rather than repair them. Customers could mail in a warranty repair or turn up to the factory in person with a broken clock or watch, hand it over and leave a short time later with a new movement installed. This wasn't unusual or controversial, it was simply good economical industrial practice. They disposed of the broken movements in the scrap metal skip to be recycled after logging the fault and identification numbers on the returned unit. Long term, this helped the quality control department identify common issues and implement design changes for reliability. Timex in the Scottish city of Dundee done the exact same strategy. I have connections to that factory too. Again, replace, not repair. Common all over the industry. This idea that disposable movements are some modern misdemeanour is thoroughly misunderstood by some purists. Historical fiction, if you like. For most of the 20th century, industrial horology was built on modularity, replaceability and efficiency. Ironically, many of the movements that people worship today, the Seiko 4R calibers, entry-level Miyota, even some Salita, these are replaced far more often than they are repaired. Almost no one talks about this, but it's true. And here's the funniest part, the System 51 is not unserviceable. I've spoken to a watchmaker who can repair them using donor movements. Upgrade kits exist with replacement balance assemblies that can be regulated, and we're at a stage now where 3D printing spare parts is feasible. It's not convenient yet, but it's absolutely possible. You can even change the case on your Blancpain Swatch collaboration to a 316L stainless steel or even titanium if you so desire. Which brings me on to the part that shocked me. I tested my Ocean of Storms over 72 hours. It gained 2 seconds, not per day, but in total. That's well within COSC chronometer tolerances. That beats many METAS certified movements in the timekeeping department. Then I tested it again, more controlled conditions off the wrist, and I get plus 2 seconds per day. 2 seconds. That is a mega master chronometer territory, Tudor MT series territory, Panerai 3-day caliber territory, high-end Swiss mechanical movement territory, full stop, no debate, none at all. And here's the truth, for me this movement has been rock solid and it keeps excellent time. A £350, $420 Swatch collaboration watch performing at METAS level consistency. That is why I started looking deeper, because this accuracy isn't an accident. It's a direct outcome of the movement architecture. The System 51 uses polymers in the gear chain that don't oxidise, they don't dry out, and they don't require traditional lubrication, and they maintain a highly stable friction coefficient over time. The escapement is laser set, similar to many of the Tissot PRX models. The movement is sealed, protected from dust, debris and lubrication migration. The Swatch System 51 doesn't hack by design, and that's part of why it works. Removing the hacking mechanism eliminates extra levers, extra springs and additional friction points, which reduces movement drag overall. It lowers the overall failure rate of the movement. Fewer parts mean fewer tolerances to drift, better energy efficiency and a more stable power reserve. In a sealed, fully automated movement like the System 51, Accuracy comes not from adjustment, but from consistency, and this is how Swatch engineered it. It has had the ability to behave exactly like its big brother Blancpain 50 fathoms movements baked right in. It is remarkable and a completely intentional level of attention to detail that no one else seems to have noticed. And here's a further insight nobody seems to have realised. Magnetism doesn't just affect hairsprings and pallet fork escapements. The plates, bridges, screws, or even the case itself can become magnetised, and that creates lingering magnetic fields that distort the movement's timekeeping ability. But polymers don't magnetise, carbon composites don't magnetise, ceramic composites don't magnetise. It also uses a highly anti-magnetic Nivacron hairspring. Belt and braces with this System 51. The Blancpain Swatch has a natural anti-magnetic architecture. By accident or by brilliance, the result is the same. It shrugs off magnetic interference simply because the materials refuse to hold magnetic memory. This same logic applies to Panerai Lab ID, a movement made with carbon nanotube plates, polycarbonate bridges and lubrication-free design, a watch celebrated for its innovation, and when you lay the philosophies side by side, something becomes very clear. The Blancpain Swatch and the Panerai Lab ID, they share the same movement ethos, the same materials intelligence, the same low-friction philosophy, the same anti-magnetic behaviour, the same push towards engineered composites instead of traditional metals. Blancpain itself regularly uses ceramic composites in its higher end pieces, one of which I got some wrist time with recently at the boutique, but that's going to be the subject of another video. If you don't want to miss that episode, click the subscribe button below and get notified when that video drops. Then there's the crown. I've actually heard people say it doesn't have a screw down crown and it's only got 91 metres of water resistance as a result. Well, I've got an answer to that too. The original 50 fathoms was rated to that exact depth level. The clue is in the name, that is 50 fathoms. The depth rating that gifted the watch its name, along with an obscure reference to the Shakespeare play The Tempest. But I digress. The original 50 fathoms also didn't have a screw down crown. Rolex had the patent for screw down crowns. That Wilsdorf character, he sure was a wily old fox, but it did encourage Blancpain to deliver their own system of gaskets and crown architecture to essentially achieve the same water resistance as the first Rolex Submariner, all without a screw down crown. This was a trusted, field-tested dive watch that did not have a screw down crown. Maybe knowing this history helps me be a little less harsh on the Seiko 5KX. The winding on the Blancpain Swatch is anti-clockwise, but when you turn it clockwise, it has a spring-loaded clicking pawl. That makes the whole watch, between that and the bezel, very tactile. A fidget spinner for watch collectors. Solid horological thinking going on there. The Ocean of Storms, it's accessible, it's democratic, it's fun, and it's far more technically interesting than most people have realised. Even the case design supports this narrative. Bioceramic is not brittle like zirconia ceramics, it's a composite. A clever composite, 2/3 ceramic, 1/3 bio-derived polymer, which means it has a hardness and a little flex. It resists cracks because the polymer matrix prevents brittle fracture. In fact, the strap hardware being bioceramic is structurally stronger than many people assume. It absorbs shock, it gives slightly under tension. It's exactly the kind of material you want for buckles and tangs. And the irony, the case of the Ocean of Storms is remarkably similar to my Panerai Carbotech, both in materials choice and architecture. Let's talk about the strap The concept, recycled fishing nets. It's brilliant. It ties directly into Blancpain's ocean conservation heritage. Philosophically, it's perfect. In practice, the implementation isn't exactly great. It's a polarising design choice. It tells the right story, but it doesn't give the best wearing experience. It doesn't match the character of this particular watch. It's a hangover from those earlier, more colourful Blancpain Swatch watches. I changed mine and it transformed the watch. And that's part of the charm. You can complete the collaboration in your own way. Another item I upgraded was the threaded bars. The original hex bars, while strong, are prone to threading, so the upgraded ones I ordered in solved that issue, and I've kept the OEM bars as backups. This is incidentally another design and implementation synergy with Panerai, who use threaded steel bars across many models, although the Blancpain design is a split threaded bar and Panerai bars screw into threads cut into the lug wall. Ironically, the Carbotech Panerai watches, they use spring bars with metal collar reinforcement, remarkably similar to architecture used in carbon bicycle frames where the wheel axles go through, whereas Swatch actually managed to keep the historical Blancpain hex threaded bars. These threaded bars also enable you to safely use a 20mm NATO strap on the 22mm lug width case. I really enjoyed that small portion of visible bar without the risk of it popping out the way a more orthodox spring bar could when used with a slightly narrower strap. It looks very tool-tastic that way. Long term, I have settled on this leather strap with yellow stitching and a large Panerai style DLC coated buckle and tying. It allows you to enjoy that sapphire exhibition case back with the decoration on show, and crucially, it moves the watch closer to your wrist. Instead of sitting proud on 2 layers of NATO fabric, it's very easy to forget you're wearing it now. When you put all of these elements together, the comfort, the accuracy, the lume, the vintage look crystal, the bezel action, the anti-magnetism, the materials, the dial finishing, the design DNA, the movement philosophy, the history of industrial replaceability in its true context, you begin to see what the early reviews all missed. This watch isn't superficial, it isn't a gimmick, it isn't a toy. It's actually one of the most sincerely interesting, accessible watches released in the last decade, streets ahead of the better selling but inferior Moonswatch implementation. And here's the line I never expected to say. This is Blancpain's Lab ID at an incredible value. The same philosophy, the same materials implementation logic, the same friction-free anti-magnetic thinking, the same comfort, the same vision of what future mechanical watchmaking can be. Both are modern composite reissues of original military dive watches, both with comfort, convenience and vintage military steampunk charm built right in. Let's do some real world maths. Swatch rates the System 51 very conservatively at around 5 years of daily use, roughly 1,825 running days. But this isn't a daily watch for me. I wear it 2 consecutive days a month, usually at the weekend. Now here's the key point, it doesn't hack and it's got a 90-hour power reserve, so after I take the watch off it keeps running for around 4 more days, so that gives around 6 days of movement operation per month, about 72 days per year. So take that same conservative 1,825 day lifespan and divide it by this usage pattern. And for me, in my usage case, I'm looking at just over 25 years of operation. If the watch doesn't show an obvious manufacturing fault during the 2-year international warranty period, that outcome, it's not unrealistic. It's exactly what the design allows for. At about $500, that's $20 a year. That sure puts a different spin in the situation. And remember, all those figures are conservative. In the fullness of time, I think the early colourful versions will be remembered as the playful spark, but the Ocean of Storms, the monochrome, mature, serious version is going to be seen as a model that revealed the collaboration's true potential and could potentially open the path to many more collaborations in the future. Breguet, Harry Winston, Jackie Rose, who knows? There is far more to this watch than the dismissive early voices allowed themselves to see. And after living with it, wearing it, testing it, and understanding its engineering, I genuinely think this is something special, a small, unexpected piece of modern horology that resonates with Q Factor far beyond its price point. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. The watch world is a casino, a glamorous, mysterious, sometimes intimidating space where tradition, money and hype all orbit the same spinning wheel. Welcome back to Horological. At the front, underneath the bright lights, you'll find the excitement, the laughter, the newcomers testing their luck against impossible odds and systems designed to keep them losing. That studio underdog, the open lobby, full of colour, humour, accessible, unpretentious, refreshing, and through a heavy draped velvet curtain at the back, the lights are dim, the air thickens with cigar smoke and quiet confidence. That's H. Moser. A world of bespoke suits, whispered valuations, and mechanical masterpieces that never need to explain themselves. Two worlds, one game. And for the first time, the old money table decided to pull up a chair at the new money floor. Studio Underdog didn't stumble into success, they designed it. In an industry addicted to grayscale minimalism and hierarchy, they showed up with colour, confidence and a cheeky wink. Watermelon, mint chalk chip, desert sky, classic chronograph by compacts proportions, rewired for a generation raised on design, not deference. These watches aren't jokes, they're serious mechanics with a sense of humour. They celebrate movement, but they also celebrate mood and colour theory. Studio Underdog proved you can love horology without worshipping it, that you can laugh at the language of luxury while still respecting the craft. They made horology fun again, the bright lit lobby where anyone could pull up a seat. And somewhere in that back room of the horological casino, Moser peered through the curtain and they noticed. Heinrich Moser & Co. is the opposite atmosphere, refinement replacing noise, minimalism so confident it sometimes deletes the logo and marketing fanfare altogether. Their Fume dials are smoke and depth made solid, unearthly, ethereal even, their finishing exquisite, their humour dry, almost non-existent. They've trawled the industry before, the Swiss Mad Cheese case watch being Moser's own quiet protest against the perceived dilution of the Swiss-made moniker. On the surface it looked playful, almost absurd, a luxury watch cased in something that resembled a block of Emmental cheese. But beneath the humour was a very deliberate critique. Moser was calling out how little Swiss-made had come to mean, how a label once associated with craft, provenance and integrity could be reduced to a box-ticking exercise. It wasn't a joke aimed at consumers, it was a piece-unique satire aimed inwardly at the industry itself, delivered by a brand confident enough to laugh from inside the club rather than shout from outside it. That's Moser at their best. Mischief with intent, provocation with a thesis, and humour used as a scalpel rather than a punchline. Their message was poignant, timely, and resonates with relevance years later. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material, composite Vacheron Mont d'Or cheese. Case diameter, 42mm. Thickness, 9.4mm. The lug width, 20mm. Lug to lug, 44.7mm. The movement is the in-house calibre HMC 327. Power reserve, 72 hours. The crystal, high-grade sapphire. Water resistance, 120 metres. And the weight, 80 grams on the Swiss-sourced leather strap. Oh, those poor milker cows. In 2019, Moser released the Nature Watch, a deliberately provocative piece adorned with real plants. Yes, living fauna paired with a woven grass strap that quite literally needed trimming and watering to survive. On the surface it was absurd, a luxury mechanical watch that behaved more like a houseplant than an heirloom, but once again the humour was only the entry point, the funnel. This was Moser using satire as commentary, questioning sustainability narratives, materialistic fetishism, and the industry's growing obsession with performative environmentalism. It wasn't a greenwashed marketing exercise, it was a mirror held up to Swiss watchmaking itself, and crucially, the message didn't come from the outside, it came from inside the highest echelons of haute horology. From a brand secure enough in its craftsmanship and credibility to critique the system it benefits from. That's what gives Moser's provocations weight. They don't shout, they don't posture, they quietly expose contradictions using humour, confidence and mechanical excellence as their delivery mechanism. Then Studio Underdog arrived, uninvited to the back room but impossible to ignore, making waves in the foyer and bright lit front assembly. Their drops sold out instantly, their Instagram lit up with colour and community. They had what even the finest ateliers couldn't manufacture, unstoppable momentum. And Moser, quietly brilliant and slightly insular, felt that shift. Collectors weren't only buying movements anymore, they were buying belonging. Studio Underdog had become a venerable destination for the if you know you know crowd, if you know watches crowd even. And Moser wanted a slice, perhaps to go with the Swiss cheese watch. Here was a company applying that gastronomy-led design ethos that Moser pioneered at the haute horology end, except Studio Underdog were applying it in an exclusive but also accessible manner. Let's have a look at Moser's part of the passion project. The case diameter, 42mm. The thickness, 12.8mm. Lug width, 20mm. Lug to lug, 44.6mm. The movement, the in-house calibre HMC 800 perpetual calendar. Power reserve, 168 hours. Crystal, high-grade sapphire. Water resistance, 30 metres. And the weight, 100 grams on the OEM alligator strap. The Studio Underdog Passion Project watch. The case diameter, 38.5mm. The thickness, 14.3mm. The lug width, 20mm. Lug to lug, 44.8mm. The movement is a Sellita SW510M. Power reserve, 62 hours. The crystal, domed sapphire. Water resistance, 50 metres. And the weight, 80 grams in the OEM leather strap. Here was a company applying that gastronomy-led design ethos that Moser pioneered at the haute horology end, except Studio Underdog were applying it in an exclusive but also accessible manner. When the collaboration was announced, everyone had assumed that Moser was mentoring the newcomer. It was the other way round. Let me explain. Look closely and the fingerprints are obvious. The colour palette, the playfulness, the visual wit. That's underdog DNA pulsing through Moser's veins. For the first time, the old world atelier stepped into the bright lights to appeal to a new affluent crowd, most of whom had never given Moser a second thought. And yet here was Moser actively vying for their attention. It wasn't a handout to Studio Underdog, it was a handshake. Studio Underdog didn't borrow Moser's gravitas. Moser borrowed Studio Underdog's newly found zeitgeist. The baton of influence wasn't passed down, it was traded sideways in a symbiotic fashion, because in 2025, relevance is the new currency, not crypto. What Studio Underdog achieved, it isn't luck, it's marketing genius on the level of Joseph Belova. Back in the early 1900s, Belova understood that emotion sells timepieces. He built America's first purpose-built watch factory, and in 1926 he aired the world's first radio commercial. At the tone, it's 8 o'clock. Belova watch time. 10 seconds that changed worldwide advertising forever. A century later, Studio Underdog uses different airwaves. Instagram, Reddit, Discord, but the psychology, it is identical. They turn customers into storytellers. Every drop feels like a shared inside joke. Every model release, a community event. Joseph Belova sold watches through radio emotion. Studio Underdog sells belonging through digital platforms. People don't just buy watches, they buy moments in time that feel personal and tell stories. And when Moser looked across into the brightly lit public games room, they saw that same spark, that Belova level brilliance of connection, and wanted stakes in that game. The Moser Studio Underdog partnership is part of a bigger pattern. The Omega Moonswatch blurred luxury and accessibility. Zenith partnered with George Bamford. Tag flirted with streetwear and digital art. The Kif collaboration. These aren't gimmicks, they're evolutionary survival strategies where the old world approaches the new in a sustained effort to gain a new audience and remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. The new high rollers aren't the collectors with vaults full of platinum tourbillons. They're the communities that move markets with memes and wrist shots. Nico Leonard completely gets this. Relevance now moves faster than any rotor, even one of those broken Sellita SW200 ones. And Moser's real bet, it wasn't in dial aesthetics, it was in brand visibility. They crossed the room to join the energy. They were welcomed to the fun table, and the gamble worked. The fact I am here now making this video sometime later as a retrospective and not a retcon shows it worked, because here we are talking about Moser, and that's the purpose. Talking about them in the same breath as hype-driven micro-brands. That was killer strategy. Moser didn't just collaborate, they engineered relevance. They stepped out of the smoke and into the light. Studio Underdog didn't lose authenticity. Moser didn't lose credibility. Both brands gained cultural gravitas and a powerful symbiosis of collaboration. The new jackpot, it isn't forged in precious metal or cheese cases. It's cast in attention span and exposure. And Moser quietly just won a mountain of chips to cash in at their leisure. In the casino of horology, Every player has their place. Studio Underdog, they brought the buzz. Moser brought the serious weight of haute horology. Together they proved the old world prestige and new world playfulness. They're not opposites, they're partners, sometimes in the same game. Because for all the talk about heritage and exclusivity, the true lifeblood of watchmaking is curiosity. And when curiosity meets craftsmanship, the results are magic. Whether it's a million Swiss francs tourbillon or a hand-wound mechanical chronograph painted like a watermelon. So yes, Moser's strategy worked. We're talking about them now. Somewhere in that smoky back room of Swiss horology, they're smiling behind their cards, thinking they just played the smartest hand in the house. But in this game, sometimes it's the underdog that beats the house. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological.